Okay, hi everyone. I hope you are getting a chance to enjoy your Sunday, and I hope you get a chance to join us on this episode of Health Collective Talks with the wonderful Kamna Chhibber. We are back, Kamna, to talk a little bit more about mental health and the workplace. And there's certainly a lot of issues that keep coming up. So I'd love to get your thoughts on a few of these questions. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Health Collective is where we share stories, most of them centered around lived experience when it comes to mental health. This is from an India lens. And we have wonderful contributors and advisors like Kamna, who have been sharing for quite a while now tips, strategies, ways to get help. Because there's no point, I think, Kamna, talking about some of these issues and not really addressing how can you access resources, how can you get help, how can you heal. So a big warm welcome back to you. I'm just going to make sure my phone is on silent and let's get into it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amrita. It's always a pleasure to be back on this platform with you and having these conversations because, like we always keep reiterating, that it's important to keep having more and more interactions around mental health, mental well being, what are mental health related illnesses, and workplaces are the space where we spend so much of our time, so much of our energy, so much of our thought process,
Yeah.
whether you're physically present there or not, that these can become the very situations which can impact people in very, very strong and significant ways. So it becomes extremely crucial to look at what workplace mental health and well-being can be all about, and how can both individuals and systems contribute towards making workplaces a space where people feel safe, they feel they can have conversations, they feel good about being there. And
Yeah.
of course, stressors, challenges will always be there, but what could be that better way of being able to cope or to navigate that scenario becomes very important, that we do need to talk about this aspect.
For sure. And I think if we don't talk about it, sometimes we don't realize the scale of the issue. Those of you who are joining us potentially on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, we're trying this out for the first time. Thank you so much for your attention. You can put your comments and questions, which I'll put to Kamna as well. Kamna, there was this article I was reading in People Matters that quoted from this Deloitte study about, what poor mental health is costing India. That's a separate conversation. But that article says 47% of those surveyed reported workplace stress as the biggest factor impacting their mental health. So I'm going to ask you one question, very basic question. It doesn't sound like workplace stress is ever going to be non-existent. Is there some happy place where there's no workplace stress, or do we all have to just get used to the idea and figure out ways to navigate that stress?
See, I think stress is a part and parcel of life. And in fact, if you look at just the basic understanding of stress itself, there is the good stress, which we call eustress, and there is the bad stress, which creates the distress. And it's about what is the level or the intensity of the stressors. What are the resources that you have available with you to be able to cope with it? What are the kind of coping mechanisms that are in place? What are the support systems that you feel exist? How much do you feel that you can control the situation? Or what are the kind of changes that you think you can effect in those situations? All of these pieces tend to contribute towards how do you perceive that stress within the space that you're occupying. And of course, workplace related stress is a reality. It's not going to go away. Even when we are going to be coming down to a point where, say, for instance, in Europe and all, they're trying out the 4-day work week, it does not mean that workplace stress will go away. You may just have a better balance of how much time you're spending at the workplace and how much time you're spending at home or doing extracurricular or recreational activities. But it does not mean that when you're at the workplace, the interpersonal issues, the role related conflicts, the work pressure related aspects, how am I being compensated for my work, all of those pieces would still continue to exist. And it's always going to keep on creating stress in some form or the other. And it's important for us to understand, accept this, be cognizant of this reality, so that we have realistic expectations, but also remember that there can certainly be certain things which can be done which would enable us to better manage that stress, both individually, as teams, as groups, or as an organization.
So let me ask you, you touched upon several, themes there. When it comes to workplace stress, we know that there are certain things that happen in a workplace, whether it's by experience or because of the, what people come and talk to you about. the studies that have been done. So these are a few. I want to dive a little deeper with you in terms of these categories. One is they talk about lack of control. When you're in a workplace where you have no autonomy, or you really don't have also awareness or transparency in terms of the impact the work you're going to have has, apparently that's one cause of stress.
Mhm.
There is conflict in multiple relationships, which you talked about. Of course, by virtue of being in a workplace, there are multiple relationships. That conflict can cause stress. The fact of the matter is your role can change, that can cause stress. Lack of clarity on your role, that can also cause stress. I want to ask you a little bit, Kamna, situating as we are now in April 2023, people have gotten used to flexible working, remote working, coming back to the office, made a lot of changes in their lifestyle just to accommodate, of course, this huge portion
Yeah.
of our lives, which is called work. How much of that is layering all of this? Because it feels like we've had very big changes, and I'm not
Mhm.
sure that all companies have had a chance to even address this with their workforce.
See, of course, I don't think that most of us have recognized what has been the kind of impact a lot of these changes or transitions have had on people. I think that organizations have not necessarily been able to look at change, the impact of the change, how are people coping with that change, is there some additional support they may require to cope with that change. But yes, when we have been going through these processes, we do recognize very increasingly that supporting people in the workplaces is a very, very critical component that does need to be looked at and considered when you're looking at workplace mental well-being. Individual distress is something that cannot be ignored, and individual differences, like Amrita you pointed out, comes from multiple elements, and some of those elements can include what is it that is going on with an individual's role, how are they being compensated, do they feel connected to the organization, do they feel they have people to talk to, do they feel that what they had thought the role would involve, it is commensurate to what their expectations were. Do they feel that the studies they did and what their goals were for their life, they are being met? Am I growing through the entire process of doing the job that I'm doing? Am I being appreciated? Do I get the requisite rewards? Do I feel safe, both physically and emotionally safe in the space that I am in when I'm working with colleagues? And all of these pieces become extremely critical. And what it means is that while we keep on placing the ownership on individuals to share if they feel that there is something which is not okay, it also means that a system and the management or the leadership within that system need to be more and more cognizant and attuned to what may be going on with individuals. It's a reciprocal process which is going to be critical to ensuring that systems and individuals are working collaboratively. It's not I, as a person, need to make sure my workplace is fine for me. It's about I, as an individual, need to look at what works for me, yes, but what would overall benefit the larger landscape of the organizational system. And somewhere I think that kind of commitment or that kind of a psychological contracting with your organization is important, because that's where change really happens. And you start bringing in about new ways of engaging, new ways of doing things. That's something which is very critical, which I feel systems and individuals need to focus on. How do we create a psychological contract, a way to engage mentally and emotionally, and not just on the basis of finances, the people who are working within that particular system?
So it sounds like there's a role there for leadership in a company, for team managers, for teammates as well. Ritesh has this question, which is, of course, the heart of this whole half an hour, which is how can we reduce stress? And I do want to follow this up with Kamna. We will talk a little bit about burnout and why that happens. But in terms of some of the things you talked about, it's possible you're in a workplace where they are watching and going to implement some of what you've said. It's possible you're in a workplace where people don't really care beyond the bottom line, right? So how do you navigate both these scenarios, and then if you're the individual, reduce the impact that stress is having on you?
See, I think from an individual standpoint, there are a few things that we do need to start, bringing into play for our own selves. One, I think as an individual, one has to recognize that life has multiple aspects to it, and you can't just focus all your energy and all your time, thought process into one piece of your life. So, work is extremely crucial. You're spending maximum amount of time there, but there are other pieces to the pie as well. You've got your family, you've got your recreation, you've got your reading, you've got your other passions, you've got what is happening in society, in culture. All of those pieces are also critical to you as an individual, and it's important to keep on reminding yourself of that. That while work is something which is integral to me, the life that I lead, it is also one part of my life. When you create that sort of a balanced thought process, it enables you to be able to take that step back once in a while to reflect on what is it that I can do to be able to make sure that the balance is okay. It's not getting too askew, wherein I am getting trapped in thoughts and feelings which are constantly revolving around work. The second part, which is very important for individuals when you're looking at reducing the stress, is being able to disengage from the work once you've left work. A lot of people tend to carry work home or with their own selves, and they keep on reflecting on or mulling over what happened at work. If there are situations which are troubling you at work, you must try and find a way to be able to address them during the course of the day. Not everything can be done that way, but if you can close a majority of the situations on the same day in the workspace, you're going to ensure that it does not linger on for you and does not keep on breeding the sense of discontentment or unhappiness about how things are proceeding at work. The third aspect is building a large number of recreational activities or areas of passion which allow you to be able to disengage, quieten the chatter which happens in the head when you're feeling troubled, which you can kind of recede into so that you can get that mental break. You can allow yourself to relax, rejuvenate, and you can come back to whatever other problems or the challenges at work and tackle them more effectively. I think the fourth element is about learning how to have conversations. I think a lot of times what we tend to be missing out on are the skills to be able to communicate what is my experience when I'm working in a workplace. We may not always have a very cogent understanding of what is causing me to feel stressed. We typically end up utilizing just the fact that I am feeling stressed as a statement. What is it that is stressing me? What is it that can mitigate that stress? We don't necessarily verbalize those pieces, and so we feel that we're constantly saying the same thing and nothing is getting solved. So the redundancy in what we're saying is often contributing to the continuity of that experience, and that needs to stop. So what ownership we need to take as an individual is to be able to pinpoint, this causes me stress, this causes me stress. If this can be done, it could be helpful to me. You may not always have the answers with your own self, but be willing to talk to people around you. So therein comes the next piece: build the right support system around you. Don't look at your workplace only as a competitive space. Recognize that it's also a place where people are going to be working collaboratively towards a common goal. And if we're looking at achieving certain common goals, you need to look at each other as support systems. Having those in place are important both within the workspace and outside the workspace. So, broadly, these are some of the things which can certainly help manage stress better. And we have to keep on reflecting on what are my primary ways of coping with situations and try and see that, can I add some other elements which could enhance the coping styles or the ways in which I typically manage situations, and see if something else as an approach could be more effectively. But often for that you need inputs from the outside, because we can hit mental block or develop a tunnel vision. So it would be helpful to be able to talk to others around us. So which is where the support system again comes in to help you figure out what could be the better way.
And in terms of that support system, it could be allies, it could be buddies. We've talked about this in the past as well. It could be, folks on other teams in case there's a little bit too much competition in your own team. Kamna, I do want to ask you, when we look at some of these different scenarios, now there is, I was just reading something which says we might want to stop thinking about work-life balance and think about work-life harmony or work-life integration, because like you just said, work is one of our identities. Sometimes it is a dominant identity, which is a whole different issue to juggle with. But the way things have been going, a lot of us, just those boundaries seem to blur. So when you're
Hmm.
talking about coping with work stress, are they the same? Is it essentially the same idea of having healthy coping strategies which you need to lean back on? That's also a muscle we need to develop, right?
Oh, absolutely. We have to develop that muscle and we have to keep on working on it. See, it's important to recognize that when you enter into the workspace, you don't come in knowing how you're going to handle situations, right? It's a skill that you're going to keep on building, and the building of that skill will happen in multiple ways. It's not just putting yourself or finding yourself in situations and then learning what can I do, how did this work for me, what else could have been done. It's also about observing what else is happening around you. And again, I feel that if you're not connected to people around you, how will you know how are they managing things for themselves? A lot of the inputs that we can get vicariously just through observation, by recognizing what people are doing around us, go amiss completely because we are disconnected from peers, we are disconnected from people who may be working in other spaces, and it becomes extremely important to figure out how is it that we can keep moving forward. So I do feel that it's very crucial to keep on having those conversations internally, also to say that, okay, this was a situation, this is how it was worked on. It reminds me of, like, for instance, in medical systems, right? What is the approach? You hit a difficult case, you sit down and you go and talk about it. What was done, what was effective, what was ineffective, what could be done later, right? And I think the similar approach needs to be there even within organizations. For individuals specifically, if you're seeing that there are certain types of situations which come up more frequently, can we have group meetings, team meetings, larger organizational meetings, where those pieces can be picked up to say, okay, this was a situation which has been observed, this is how it was tackled, what could have been alternative ways. So you can, in a group setting, develop the right kind of skills to be able to manage some of those scenarios even in the future. So I think those pieces are very, very crucial, which often don't get spoken about at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is to notice that what you've said, so much of that takes the onus of the individual. It's not just an individual problem, right? There's something about working in a team. We shouldn't feel like we're alone. It might be, Kamna, of course, real world being what it is. You might have a manager who's not responsive, but you might be able to find an ally somewhere else in another team. Can you take us through a few of the most common issues that come up when clients are talking to you, for example, about workplace stress? And then let's talk about burnout and how we can kind of make sure that we're able to prevent, because again, you've been talking to us a lot about the importance of preventive approach rather than waiting for something to really escalate. What are some of those signs we should look out for?
Yeah, I think one of the, besides, of course, all the other pieces that we've been talking about, which is, conflicts in roles, compensation, what your expectations were, are you getting the growth and all, one of the other major stressful situations tends to be about how interpersonal relationships are at work. And these can become extremely fraught with either negativity or stress or anxiousness, or it can create a lot of distress for individuals. And I think this becomes one stressor which does need to be looked at. um, the stress in interpersonal relationship often results on account of what is the kind of communication that is characteristic of that relationship. And when you find yourself in scenarios where the communication is either breaking down or it is becoming aggressive, there is a lot of conflict which is not moving in a direction of figuring out resolutions, and instead people are focusing only on looking at what they need for their own selves, and it's not an approach which is a collective one, which is more individually focused. I think some of those pieces tend to lead to a lot of interpersonal distress, for people within the organizational system. And understanding this, the dynamics that exist within an organization in terms of the interpersonal relationships is extremely important, because every organization, despite whatever technology and AI may come in, is still going to be composed of people. You can't replace the people, and if people are going to be working alongside each other, how do they engage in forming and maintaining good relationships with each other is something which will always be very crucial. And I think, when we're looking at, even like you mentioned, burnout. What is burnout about? Burnout is about when stress levels have reached a certain point, crossed a very high threshold, which completely takes away from an individual's ability to cope with that situation. It leads to experiences of significant emotional exhaustion. It makes an individual feel completely disconnected from their work. They feel a sense of depersonalization, as though, you're just moving through this kind of a fog and you're just doing things mechanically. And a lot of times these signs of burnout, the fact that an individual may be doing okay but they don't feel as though they're accomplishing anything, a lot of these signs of burnout can be very visible within the system, and yet people may not end up receiving the kind of help and support because those around them were not aware what it could have looked like. And there are so many signs and symptoms which could communicate to people around us that someone is experiencing distress on account of a compromise on their mental health, their state of well-being, which just because we are either not aware or because we don't have the time to notice it, we've got so much which is there on our own plates that we just don't want to engage at that level, that they just get missed, and people reach these stages of either burnout or developmental health related illnesses because they've not been able to take timely action around mitigating the stressors or figuring ways in which they could manage things a little better. And I think some of the simple ways in which mental health related concerns can become evident are include things like, you're seeing a person who's becoming either extremely withdrawn or very isolated, or you're finding that, they have reactions to comments or to feedback which are uncharacteristic of them. Say, for instance, they are becoming more reactive to it, feeling angry, getting aggressive, feeling that they are being targeted a lot of the time, getting very upset when there is some situation which is not working in their favor, or they're trying to do a particular task but they get extremely easily disappointed, things which were not characteristic of them in the past. A lot of times you may notice that this person seems very disengaged from the work, they look very tired and fatigued, they're not being able to focus extremely well, they seem worried and anxious, anticipating that, the outcomes may not be the best. Oftentimes they may not operate with as much confidence or belief in their own selves. Previously they could give presentations easily, share their thought process in a team meeting easily, but suddenly you've seen that they're not sharing as much, talking as much. The kind of creativity or lateral thinking they used to display, it's not there as much. So a lot of these signs could be there. Maybe they also start taking a lot of days of absence from the workplace. And essentially what you're seeing is this person is somewhere becoming more missing within the system. However you knew them to be within the system, they're not there as much. And sometimes people will also share that, I'm not enjoying the work as much, I'm not feeling as connected. मजा नहीं आ रहा है, मन नहीं कर रहा है, I just don't feel like I want to do this, I'm feeling lost, I'm feeling confused. um and if you're seeing some of these things or someone is verbalizing something like this, it's important to not ignore it, because as soon as you start ignoring it, you are reinforcing to the person that no one cares, no one is interested in being around me or seeing that, I am struggling with something or wants to find a way to help me or support me. And I think that's a huge concern, because that's where that psychological contract even with the workplace goes missing, because suddenly the person feels that I've been investing so much here in the people, in the work, no one is investing in me. What about me as an individual? So I think some of these pieces tend to reflect that, how within an organization you may be able to notice, within your team you may be able to notice that a person may not be in the best place when it comes to their mental well-being, and it could be a chance and an opportunity for you to reach out to them. And it's important that we do not hesitate to reach out and simply ask that, I have noticed that you don't seem to be your own self, is there something that I can help with, is there something that's been going on for you? Even that much may just make a person feel seen and heard, and that could really benefit them in feeling that, okay, yes, there are people who are invested in me, I need to find a way to move out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, hello to everyone joining us from the Philippines. I love it. Thank you for joining us this evening. And please feel free to put your questions or comments in for Kamna, who's, of course, a clinical psychologist. Chaitanya, thanks for saying hi to both of us. We feel seen, we feel heard. And Ritesh found one of the comments very helpful. So thanks for putting that question. We'll be going for another 10-15 minutes. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ping them in. And I'm also checking our Twitter. Kamna, when you talk about the fact that, and this really hits home, right? When we're in a workplace, we might
Mhm.
notice someone who's feeling seeming all of a sudden withdrawn. We might know even some of the dynamics that are leading to that. We might hesitate. You're absolutely right. I think a lot of times we're kind of like, well, is it my business? Am I overstepping? But you just
Hmm.
gave us a very sort of easy way of kind of letting people know that they're seen. Literally just going up and saying, hey, I notice you're not like your normal self. Is anything you want to talk about? Now, where do we put that line on saying that it's not that I'll know how to fix everything, right? But do are we kind of saying that just by letting that person feel seen and heard, that might be a step that helps? and then what comes after that?
That certainly is a step that helps, because a lot of times when people are experiencing difficult circumstances in their life, or they're going through a mental health related concern, they often feel alone in that entire journey. And to know that there is someone who can see that they have a certain struggle and who is able to understand that they may be not as present in the situations that they typically used to be like, it helps them feel that, yes, people are concerned and connected to me as an individual, and there is help available if I do need it, which is something which is extremely important, I feel. And the next step, I feel, it's not about, if you are seeking to share this with a person and to tell them that, hey, I am noticing that you're not your usual self, and if there is something that I can do to support you, it does not necessarily mean that the ownership has shifted entirely to you to make sure that everything now needs to be taken care of by you. It's about being available as and when you can be, letting this person know that you are there as an individual, as a support system for them. The most important thing that you can keep doing for them, if you notice that this is a persistent state that they are in, is to encourage them to seek help. That help needs to come from, if, say for instance, you're just an acquaintance, from encouraging them to talk to their friends, to talk to their family, to maybe meet an expert. It's not that you have to push them to go and see a psychologist, or to see, the clinic doctor who's there in your organization. You can simply just encourage them that, at any point in time, if there's something that I can help with, feel free to reach out to me. So it's not that, you've suddenly undertaken a role in which means that, every day now you need to go and check on them once a day, twice a day. It's not a prescriptive thing. You need to do it in a comfortable way. You need to be cognizant of how much you can take on as well. Sometimes it can be that a person may actually start opening up, and you may feel completely lost and not sure about how you can support or help in resolving that situation. And you can very frankly state in that situation to say that, I really appreciate that you could trust and believe that you could share this with me, and I'm really happy about that you could feel that sense of comfort. I do feel that I may not be equipped fully to be able to help you resolve this situation, but you know what, that I'm here, I'm rooting for you, I'm here in your support, and whatever it is that I can do, I will certainly do. But I feel that, maybe XYZ could be a better person to talk to over here in regard to this matter, or maybe it would be better if you think of reaching out to an expert, because these situations seem to be repetitive, or there seems to be a certain pattern here which, maybe someone who's an expert can help you fix as well. So, there could be ways in which you can communicate very easily that you appreciate the risk that they're taking in that situation in sharing what they are, and at the same time that, while you may not be able to support them by figuring out exactly what needs to be done, but yet you are still going to be there. So if there is a crisis, there is an emergency, they can reach out to you. And at the same time, there are these experts, there are helplines, places where you can reach out for input, for information and support as and when needed.
And I love this because I really do believe this sort of buddy system works, right? As long as we don't try and conflate being a buddy with being sort of the expert who can fix all your problems, because that's obviously the challenge for the person who's trying to reach out. So I love what you just encapsulated there, Kamna. It's very actionable. I think any of us in a workplace, we obviously have affinities. We end up making friends on the job, but we can also be that listening ear, or buddy for other people as well, and just keep an eye out. It's not very difficult to notice when people are showing these signs that you mentioned. I do want to ask you, one question about us as individuals. Now we know that whole kind of the busy culture, which has really
Hmm.
taken hold the last several years, is coming under a little bit more scrutiny these days, with people saying like, look, you have to look at your other facets of your identity.
Yeah.
I'm reading incidentally, The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Mate, which is another level altogether of talking about how societally we've put this pressure on ourselves as well. Do you think as individuals, or rather, when is it right as individuals, who often want to give 100 120% to anything we do, when is it the right time to cut ourselves some slack? Because sometimes we push ourselves so much, because yes, the promotion, yes, the validation at work, yes, you're doing great, everyone around you seems to appreciate you when you're doing so well, but that can also be that treadmill that just doesn't end, and you can feel yourself sometimes crumbling under that pressure. When is it okay to tell yourself, it's okay if I'm not perfect in this next presentation, it's okay if I don't really, and I don't want to say kill yourself working, but that does seem to be that metaphor, right? Because we do tend to push, 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 then you hit that wall of burnout, and then it's kind of it's not too late, of course you can rebuild, but it kind of feels like you could have just eased up a little bit before that?
The short answer to that is every time is the right time, I would say. That's the short answer to it. And the
That's
reason I say that is
yeah.
because, you know, I think we have started making performance and achieving a target or having an outcome into such an important thing that we have stopped enjoying the process of it, and which is what leads to the experience of the kind of stress and pressure that we continually do. If you were to just enjoy the process of doing something, you're likely to end up having a good outcome as well. So if you're constantly straining and stressing over what will be the end product, what is going to be the outcome, how will I make sure I do this every time that I am supposed to do this, you will not be able to keep enjoying. And what is it that can keep us driven and motivated to do the work that we do, which is going to be a predominant part of our work, of our lives, for majority of our life, is going to be our ability to enjoy things, to be able to do things, engage with them in the most joyful manner that is possible. And we take away from that as soon as we become so focused on the outcomes alone. So it's extremely important, I feel, to give ourselves some slack, stop comparing constantly and say that, that person does this better and that person has this, and this person is doing this piece and I need to reach that goal because my friend or my mother's relative so and so is at that level as well, and I also need to be that. I think we need to start taking an approach where we are able to reflect on what is it that matters to me as an individual, and there is no fixed framework that we need to fit for that. My goals, your goals, another person's goals can be completely different. They may have nothing to do with what society thinks of as being the ideal goals. There is no ideal, right? And I think we need to start accepting that so that we can lead slightly easier, more relaxed lives. I'm not going to say that don't be goal oriented or don't be driven. I'm extremely goal oriented and driven myself. So that would never be an advice that I would give, but I would certainly say that find your own goals, determine your own drive. Stop looking at what another person is doing. Build your own benchmarks, create your own pathway, chart your own territory. There is no right or wrong. So long as you're following certain values and certain principles, you will go ahead on the right path. So you need to figure out your own sense of direction. You will get to that outcome. You'll probably get to that outcome in a much happier state. And at the same time, keep maintaining gratitude for what you do have. It may not be this much, but you honestly don't necessarily need this much at all times, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
even this is good enough, and we need to be able to recognize that. Keep moving forward, knowing that you're in a good space. And I think if you can just maintain that as an attitude, as an approach towards life in general, you'll end up achieving much more in any case.
That's so interesting because you're right. If we can frame it in such a way that we are happy with what we have, or we at least we notice what we have. I've noticed so often we just skip to the next thing, right? Like, and I've done this. When we were doing the books, we were working the book series. It was literally when one came out, I was already like, oh wow, the next one has to be done. You sometimes forget that it's not just cutting yourself slack. It's about
Hmm.
recognizing what you've done, appreciating your own efforts and achievements, and like you said, setting your own goals. Let me ask you one final question for the moment, Kamna. I did love what you said earlier also about creating or figuring out what is that recreational activity also. So here we have these tips that include liking the process, getting into the state of not just being outcome or goal
Hmm.
fixated if they're external. When you say build in some sort of recreational activity, I mean, do you want to give us some examples, like real life examples? And are you talking about something that we build in every day, or are you just looking at breaking up that kind of monotony of just having that one work identity in our heads?
I think two things are important when you're looking at recreation. I think one, of course, it needs to be something that you can, recreation may not be possible every day, but you can certainly have certain activities which are bigger stress busters for you as an individual. For a person, it could be reading daily, it could be having a cup of tea in a certain setting daily, it could be about playing music daily. But when it comes to doing these things on a daily basis, it's important to be mindfully engaged with those things. That is something which is very crucial. I think typically what ends up happening is that you're in that process of doing some recreational activity, but half your mind is also occupied somewhere else. So you may be playing some music, but at the same time you're probably glancing on your phone and looking at what messages are coming, so you're really not enjoying the music that you were playing for your recreation. So I think allowing yourself, even if you're just going to listen to one song, but to actually just listen to the song is extremely important, something that we completely miss out on. And we call this, being mindful, and inculcating almost urban mindfulness in the way we live our lives is something which is extremely crucial. And I feel that's something which is extremely important. And yes, you need to have activities which you can do, say, on a weekly basis, something which you do once in a month. Things which are bigger, which will require more time and investment, you won't be able to do them every day. So if, say, for instance, traveling is your passion, now I would love for you to travel every day, but you can't. So, but you cull out the time for it. That's important. If you enjoy painting, then cull out the time for it. Find a way to make it happen, because if you're going to wait that, at some point in time responsibilities will be lesser, I will have more time, my role will be less demanding, then I will do it, it's never happening. Things don't calm down. There is always more and more and more that we each needs to do, right? Because as you're going through the different stages of life, there are going to be newer things which come your way. So if you're looking forward to doing something, you need to do it now. Forget
Yeah.
about what it's going to be like tomorrow. None of us have seen tomorrow. So just stay in the present moment, do the best that you can now.
That's so true. We always do think that, right? Like things are going to be calmer and then I will X. But you're right. I like this. This is a lovely note for us to end this conversation for the moment. You'll find much more by Kamna on the Health Collective. Please check out our website, healthcollective.in, as well as our socials. And you can always send us your questions and comments. And Kamna will be putting those to you and bringing our viewers more episodes in this Mental Health in the Workplace series with you. Thank you so much for your insight and time, as always.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today.